What's up, everybody? Welcome to Deadlock Fight Night Between Rounds podcast. I'm Jake. I'm joined by ZP, and we're about to jump into this week's updated tier list.
Yeah, and honestly, this week, a lot of changes here in the competitive deadlock scene where we've seen some heroes go up pretty radically. Some heroes have a pretty decent fall. It shows, Jake, a lot can change in just 1 week of competition.
Yeah, I think teams, this week really started to get a stronger feel for the 3-lane meta and the ways that it's sort of subtly shifted your priority from a draft perspective. We can jump into some of the drafts from this week's Deadlock Fight Night games where we see how the top teams are prioritizing picks. One thing I noticed this week, a lot of Abrams, a lot of Mo and Krill, and being played together as well in a lot of games. So that duo, the heavy lockdown and control that they bring, as well as the great early laning presence, looks really valuable right now.
I think the other thing that looks also incredibly valuable is where Paradox stands right now, where Holliday, of course, getting nerfed a bit. Suddenly, Paradox, because you had Paradox and Holliday as kind of you can grab either one of them or sometimes both of them, but similar role, right? And now with Holliday getting nerfed a bit, Paradox suddenly looking just vastly better overall.
Yeah, Paradox definitely back on top. I think in general, a lot of the supports have been deprioritized. Especially things like Ivy, McGinnis, basically are completely forgotten right now in the drafts, going untouched, unpicked, unbanned. And then Kelvin, getting banned a lot, but not being taken very much in the first phase. Usually the bans are coming in the second phase. So I think the prio, while Kelvin, I think, is still a very strong choice, the best support by far, not proving to be necessary or critical in a lot of these drafts, at least the way the top teams are looking at the game right now.
Yeah, also Sinclair, I feel like, Sinclair, there was a huge fear of Sinclair, give up Sinclair and lose. Not the case this week. The Magician his tricks might have been exposed a little bit, Jake, is what I'd say, which is probably a good lead into our overall stats page. Brand new for a tier list segment to give you an idea of what is going on in the pro scene. And I mean, look, you look at this here for Sinclair, the win rate, pick ban, whether he was banned or picked, still pretty high at 83%, win rate 0. So yeah, when he was picked, Jake, he wasn't winning.
Yeah, I still think Sinclair is decent. I think the win rate, I wouldn't worry too much in general about the win rate, at least in this small sample size. I think the pick ban, though, is great for just giving you a sense of what the best players in Deadlock right now are valuing in terms of how they think about the game. Obviously, different players, different teams are going to have their different ideas, but we can see some pretty consistent trends where like Lash picked once, and then beyond that, a bunch of characters are completely untouched. And I think real surprises on that front are definitely Wraith. Warden maybe has been out of favor for a couple weeks, but Wraith being unpicked, unbanned is really wild to me with how much this hero has been a top choice for many weeks, months, really, of Deadlock.
Yeah, I think this is one case where we'll probably go against the pick ban here and just be like, okay, this is like the pro scene having a little bit of just collective amnesia of how good Wraith is, generally speaking. And I mean, it just obviously got deproud a little bit for other heroes, but I don't know. You look at this, I wouldn't be surprised if we come in next week and Wraith is suddenly back up to near 100% pick ban rate. It just feels like one of those weird scrim trends that you get for a hero that objectively still looks very, very good.
I mean, I think Wraith is good, but honestly, I think this is like a crazy sign to see the hero go completely untouched. Yeah. It's not just like a drop in popularity, but I think this is definitely going to hurt her standing in the tier list. But you're right. She's not going to go to F tier just because she goes unpicked for a week. I still think, especially in pubs with a lot of that individualistic play, Wraith can look really strong, really effective. We can jump into the tier list now. Let's start talking about, what is going to move up and down. I think this is the segment that folks are really waiting for, looking to think about how to pick and draft in their pubs. First off, I mean, I just look at the S tier, and while Kelvin is still good and still being banned very often, second phase, picked once this week in the first phase, I think Kelvin may be dropping to the top of A tier rather than being an S tier. I think if it were really the top S tier choice, it would be going first phase. And I think the fact that it's not, for the most part, says it's still great. It's still very strong, but it's not nearly as dominant as it once was.
Also, if one is going to go down, I feel like one has to go up. And honestly, with what we saw here this week, I think Mo is actually the back of S tier. I mean, maybe you can make the argument like front of A tier, but I think Mo, it's hard to argue the value we're seeing from Mo in all the matches this week.
I think there's a real shift in the top level, at least in terms of what's S tier. I think a lot of things are going to move there. I would even want to put Mirage up in the S tier. I mean, Mirage went first so many games, getting first picked. just ultra high prio, had like strong performances. I think people are really valuing this ability to clean up lanes and then still participate in the fight. Being able to have that global presence looks really valuable, especially with how much farm is on the map. You can have somebody to have a player jungling really defensively that can still, basically be in the fight immediately is a really powerful bit of utility. And Mirage has a lot of late game scaling. We saw some games where Mirage really took the game over and became like a huge late game threat with that farm snowball.
Here's my question. We know Paradox has to go up this week based on Paradox getting a huge buff just by virtue of Holliday going down. Is it top of A tier? I don't think we suddenly put everyone in S tier. For me, I think Paradox goes like top of A tier from what we saw this week.
Yeah, I think top of A tier is a good place to start. Could probably go S tier. I think also, thinking about S tier, I think Sinclair may need to drop down to A tier. I mean, it was really respected. I think being a new character, people having a lot of success with it. I would kind of put it maybe below Kelvin. I mean,
I would arguably, given how much Geist was still like hugely picked and what teams were prioritizing, I would say behind Geist at a minimum. Right.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of shakeups this week, honestly. So I think we'll just get to it. Yamato, not what maybe is like also a top of A demotion here with just being picked, being strong, but not being that like god tier first phase. That's where stuff like Mo, like Mirage, and also, I mean, this is actually very controversial. I think we might need to put Bebop in S tier. I mean, this hero got first banned almost every game. I mean, so many teams were taking Bebop out of the lineup. I mean, maybe just like higher in A tier is enough.
Higher
for this week,
tier.
But
yeah,
I think it's like
above
Wraith. That's how I'm thinking right now.
But here's what I'll say is here's why I think Yamato dropped and why Bebop is going up a bit right now. And my reasoning for it is that it all comes down to the fact of what happened with the jungle, right? The jungle overall contribution got nerfed. As a result, it's harder to hyper farm your Yamato into god tier status, but it also makes the early laning phase way more important, and that's one of Bebop's strongest power spikes in the entire game, especially, it's all duo lanes now. You get Bebop in, and Bebop, more than a lot of other heroes, can just win you a lane outright. Especially, too, I mean, not even just at the pro level, but even as you go down the lower skill levels, right? Like, people are even probably worse at avoiding hooks. So...
Yeah, and I think it's also in terms of like keeping Bebop out of S tier. I would say in the lower level, in the top level, I think teams are getting better and better at translating early advantages into wins, into like decisive blowouts. If they win all three lanes, like they're just gonna crush you and not give anything back. I think teams have gotten really clean with that, and they're optimizing what they can get out of the map, and when they show up to fights. And so I think somebody like Bebop with that early game, really crazy power spike is much better in a competitive environment, whereas in a pub, it's more likely that people will throw away those early game advantages, and somebody like Yamato can still profit, can still hit like the ultra late game. And for that reason, I think maybe 7 can also stay in S tier. Although, honestly, I kind of want to put Mirage at the top of S tier and 7 at the bottom. I think those two want to swap, and then Mo is in the middle.
I like that. Because, I mean, based on what we saw from 7 was the glue to a lot of top compositions this week. And 7 still looked really good when picked. And when you think about who you wanted to like headline you for a carry hero, 7 was still probably the top overall choice. So yeah. I think 7 is good where he's at.
Still S tier, but not just slightly lower prio than the other options from what we saw. With there being other choices that provide the team damage, but Mirage and Mo both having something very unique in the roster with like Mo's early super strong laning presence and then great lockdown and snowballing potential. And for Mirage, a lot of lockdown, a lot of damage and carry potential, and the farm speed and the global presence are so good right now. I'm looking now to Wraith, who I think it's like, is it an overreaction to make Wraith the top of B tier? I kind of think 0% pick rate for a week. It is a low sample size, but 0% is crazy for Wraith, and like, I wonder if teams are, I think there was like, maybe there's a bigger emphasis on team fighting, on snowballing. I don't think Wraith is the most dominant early laner, really. And Wraith was also, I think, a much stronger hero in the solo lanes than it is in the duo lanes.
Yeah.
So for me, I think there's kind of some reason to be worried about Wraith for future. I mean, I do think, like, I'm not saying she goes past the B tier, and I think top of B is like a reasonable spot, but I think this is a hero that could continue to be demoted if people are really valuing the early laning phase, and if she, doesn't find quite that same place in the duo lane.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've kind of won me over to your side here because it's just for me, it's such a harsh like snapback from Wraith
Yeah.
just being the best forever and ever and ever. But I think you're right as you start talking about the early laning element here. I think it's also the fact that like when teams consider who they want to give farm to, right? When they do,
Mm.
who are you going to give a jungle to? I just think Wraith is like a lesser priority because you think about like Wraith, if you have her go jungle, oftentimes you're gonna have to go Tesla bullets. Like her ramp up to being good if you're like feeding her jungle isn't on the level of other carry heroes or other heroes that people would want to be eating the jungle. I think that is probably hurting her pretty badly in combination with the fact that in a duo lane setup, you're right, she's not like as strong as some of the other laning options. I would say though, if we're gonna bring her down to the bottom of B, even though I'm not 100% sold at some of the contribution, if you go on the pick rate and where people are going, it does Infernus go to the bottom of A?
I think I would want to put Wraith. I would want to put Infernus maybe in like the top of B because I don't think Infernus had like the best results, but he was still picked. I think Infernus is maybe a little bit of a better choice than Wraith, though. I think a little bit stronger maybe in the duo lane with some of those like more AoE focused skills. Yeah, I think that looks okay for me for now. I kind of want to like keep going through these A tier heroes though and talk about, whose stocks are rising. We haven't talked about Grey Talon much. I think Grey Talon has continued to rise in popularity. I think people have really, especially with like how defensible now the walkers are, feels like Grey Talon can be really powerful with that incredible, long range damage potential. And got banned quite a lot, at least in last week's fight night. I don't know if they really need to move though. I mean, they are in the right spot of like still solid, just and relatively high in A tier is a pretty enviable place to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really look at Talon and Geist and necessarily think they need to move. Like maybe you can make the argument of Geist or Talon, but overall, I'm kind of okay just leaving that where it is. I do think though, if we're looking at A tier, the next movement that has to go up, and I would say like really towards the top of A tier, given the fact that again picked every single game, and then also win rate less of a valuable stat, but still won every single game on top of it. You had Mo Abrams tank lines all day long in EU and NA, and they were super effective all day long. I feel like for Abrams, I think in pick priority, I would say right behind Paradox. I think overall, Paradox is still getting picked ahead of Abrams in most cases. And I don't think every team necessarily will go for Abrams, but I think he still has to be like high in A tier now.
Yeah, I agree with this. I think Abrams, the mid game fighting, the stun potential, and the early laning, I think is just being able to deny souls really consistently and effectively is so valuable. Abrams has always been good at that, but with that subtle change where the souls now have a little bit more horizontal variance, then the shotgun I think gets extra value in those early denies. I'm also thinking, I wonder if Calico needs to come up a little bit. Like, I don't know. Is it better than Sinclair or Geist or
I think
GT?
so. I don't think
Geist and GT is competitive. I almost think it's like maybe a little bit above. Maybe it's just between Geist and GT. It feels right to me for Calico.
Yeah, I think putting her in the mix there and above Sinclair makes sense. And also, on that note, while we're making adjustments, I think look, this may be our most unpopular move ever given her fan base, but I don't think Ivy's A tier right now.
No, I agree. I think Ivy just being untouched right now in the meta. I'd kind of stick it. I don't know.
Wraith, I think.
Yeah, maybe behind Wraith, maybe even above Wraith. I don't know. Neither of these heroes are really being touched right now. I think in general, the supports have all lost a lot of value. I'm thinking about. I also think Vindicta maybe needs to climb in A tier. I don't know that it's S tier, but I think it does need a little bit of a stronger position than it is now. Maybe it's like behind Geist.
I would actually argue higher. Her pick priority was very, very high. Even though
especially
teams
in Europe
had lost. I would personally, from what we saw, I would say right behind Abrams.
Yeah, I think it is getting prioritized higher than Kelvin. I think that's fair to say. And I think the carry potential really strong, the snowball potential really strong. I think people have been finding a lot of these like longer sight lines to snipe. So I think Vindicta could come in just behind or just above Kelvin, below Abrams.
Yeah, that to me, from what we saw, that looks pretty much right. Also, I'm kind of wondering, is Holliday like? I'm not sure Holliday is still B tier. Holliday still got picked a lot. I feel like Holliday is almost where she should be.
Yeah, I think Holliday and Lash, I'm kind of okay with them for now. Like, I think they're still powerful. I think they still have a lot of play potential. Yeah, I don't, and I think really Holiday's just been surpassed by a bunch of other things that we've bumped up past her. So she has been bumped down a little bit by those, but I don't think she needs to go down any further. Holliday and Lash, which one's better? I think it's pretty close, honestly. Like team preference, stylistic choices. I think Holliday maybe has a little bit of a stronger early laning phase, which maybe puts her a little bit above Lash, but definitely lost a lot of popularity this week. Losing that bounce pad stun is a pretty huge nerf. That was, people are really playing around that for the multi-stun combos and, getting a lot of mileage there. Thinking about B tier, I wonder, does Pocket need to come up a little bit? It was like moderate priority. So honestly, when you flash the pick rate screen, I'm actually really curious. How much was Pocket picked or banned last week? So it got 4 games, so it's getting a decent play rate. I mean,
I think you could put Pocket bottom of A tier.
Yeah, the win rate's not great, but it is getting picked a bit more, and it has some good lane push, some good escapability. Yeah, I think Pocket's TBD, but I'm willing to give Pocket a little promo. I think there's a lot of playmaking, and honestly, in pubs, I think Pocket probably does look even stronger if you're a comfortable Pocket player. With having a decent last hitting weapon and some snowball potential. If the enemy isn't coordinated well and buying the right items for you, you can probably get away with a ton on this character that maybe pro games they don't let you get away with. Viscous, I think maybe needs to go up.
How much of that was Gibbs though? Like, I feel like a lot of the pick, right? Like, I don't know if we can change him a whole lot just because, like,
I just think it's a little bit higher in B tier. Maybe it's like top because it was played in a few games, right?
Yeah,
VP so Big and Ball played it,
too.
And then VP played it twice. So, and they're taking it 6th, but
no, I think the VP usage, I think he could go up.
Yeah, I wonder maybe bottom of A tier, maybe a little, even above Pocket.
Yeah, I agree actually, over Pocket for sure. I
would also say it got picked more than Lash. Actually, I'm starting to how high am I? Goo Boy pill definitely, but you need to restore some sanity. ZP. I'm like, do I want to put Viscous like above Holliday even?
From what we saw, I will go with you on the Viscous train. You could put Viscous above Holliday. I agree. I also think from what we saw, I think you also put Lash behind Pocket. Like Lash was just not.
Lash wasn't played as much, and I think those ones are going to be tight since those are with the specialist hero comfort heroes. Those ones are always going to be a little bit challenging to rank. I think we may have some movement down lower as well. I mean, is Shiv better than Ivy and Wraith? I think so. I think maybe Shiv is just behind Infernus right now.
Yeah.
Still looks good. I think if you're pubbing and you're duoing, I think Shiv Kelvin is probably still mega broken. If you just like pump heals on Shiv and Shiv has a good game, he's gonna just be a god. So I feel like Shiv has a lot of potential. I think in pro games, the fact that people they rarely get the combo since they don't really want to draft it super early. They just and a lot of times, the Kelvin gets banned. I think that hurts Shiv by proxy, but something to think about for pubbers.
Also,
Warden continues to go unpicked, but I feel like it's too crazy to take him out of B tier.
I think the difference though between like Warden and the lower tiers is that Warden has a lot of baseline power and has a lot of ways, especially in a pub game where Warden can just like win situations, especially if people don't play properly versus him. Like, I don't think I think there's other reasons that Warden isn't getting picked a whole lot right now, but I think like his overall base level is not in the Dynamo McGinnis tier, like especially or the post nerf haze tier. Like you just can't. Warden cannot go down over there. But I will say one thing that keeps bothering me the more I look at it here is that I do think we need to shift Yamato a little bit. I would shift Yamato behind Vindicta. I think behind
I'm with that.
Yeah,
I'm with that for sure. Still good, but just not being taken at quite the same prio. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I feel like Kelvin was always banned second phase. Yamato often was picked second phase, i.e., so it was like sort of a lower prio than Kelvin in a sense. But I think like hedging for pubs and for the average folks watching this who want to learn what to play, I still think Yamato is amazing right now with like the late game carry potential. It's a little bit weaker than it was last patch, but that's like a small percentage tweak in terms of your jungle farming. If you get a lot of kills, you snowball. You get a lot of, especially Sinner Sacrifice statue buffs. It still gets crazy. And then I think like the last thing I kind of want to move is I kind of want to take McGinnis down to D tier. I feel like McGinnis is like untouched even in pubs right now.
Yeah.
Like sieging towers with the turrets just doesn't really work right now. I just think the hero is a little out of place in the current meta, and I just the fact that I don't even see it played in pubs is like, I mean, like none of these bottom tier heroes are being picked for competitive deadlock. But I mean, I think it's fair to say McGinnis may be the bottom hero right now.
Not only that, but think about the idea that players like Naked won't even play McGinnis under like any situations for the most part now. And if you one trick a hero forever and you have just hit the point emotionally that you cannot bring yourself to play this hero anymore, it might be done.
It's a bad sign. When the
actually
one
just
tricks
might be
give up
done.
on it, maybe the rest of us need to give up on it too. So I think McGinnis probably waiting for a patch to revamp her, to save her, maybe a rework, something like that. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, ZP, I feel pretty good about this. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking around. I think overall, this pretty much reflects what we saw. I think it reflects the state of Deadlock, especially on the high end. I mean, I think there's a few things you could debate on. Like, for me, the only last thing to debate is like, the Lash versus Infernus, but that's pretty minor between like, bottom of A versus like top of B. I'm pretty happy with where we're at on this.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I think there's always a couple tweaks you could make, but I think we'll call it there for this week. So everybody, thank you so much for watching on YouTube, for following the streams. We have Deadlock Fight Nights every Wednesday. We also have a Rivals Fight Night if you're interested in that game on Thursdays. But you can find all our content here on YouTube. We've got Twitch. We stream on X. We're on all platforms. So subscribe, leave a comment, especially let us know on the podcast like what other kinds of content that you want to see, and hopefully we can give it to you. So this has been Deadlock Fight Night between rounds. I'm Jake. This is EP, and thanks for your support.